Someone from Ireland tried American-style bacon for the first time in his life, and his exact reaction was, way better. Why have I never tried this before? He grew up eating what most of the UK and Ireland calls bacon. He had no idea an entirely different cut of the same animal existed, and once someone explained the difference, the whole thing suddenly made sense. His actual question, close to word for word, are Americans proud of their bacon? Does it even originate from America, and why does it taste completely different from what he grew up with? He wasn't being dramatic. This was a genuinely new food experience for a grown adult who thought he already knew what bacon was. The very first reply nailed the entire answer in one sentence. British and Irish bacon is cut from the pork loin. American bacon is cut from the belly. Same animal, completely different piece of it. And that single anatomical difference explains almost everything else in this video. Because once you understand where the cut comes from, the rest of the science falls into place fast, and it comes down to one word people kept repeating. Fat. Someone put it bluntly, the answer to why does anything taste this much better is almost always fat. Pork belly carries dramatically more of it than the leaner loin, and that fat is exactly what renders down into flavor, crispness, and that specific savory richness people associate with a proper strip of bacon. And fat wasn't the only word people reached for. Someone brought up an actual cookbook and Netflix series built entirely around this idea, that four elements, salt, fat, acid, and heat, are the whole foundation of why food tastes good at all. Bacon, it turns out, is basically a perfect demonstration of three of the four working together at once. Now here's a detail that connects this all the way back to a completely unrelated fast food controversy, which genuinely surprised people who hadn't put the two together before. Someone mentioned that the switch away from beef tallow for frying French fries at a major fast food chain decades ago is still talked about as ruining the product for a lot of people. Animal fat, whether it's pork belly fat or beef tallow, tends to taste noticeably richer and holds up better at high heat than a lot of the plant-based oils that replaced it. Interestingly, some higher-end restaurants have started quietly going back to using tallow specifically because of that. This is the part that gets me about that detail. It's the exact same underlying story as the bacon comparison, just with French fries instead of pork. Animal fat versus everything that tried to replace it, and animal fat kept winning on flavor. Underneath the fat itself, there's a whole separate layer of American bacon culture that has nothing to do with the cut at all, and it's the wood. American bacon is almost always smoked and brined, same as British bacon, but the type of wood used shifts the entire flavor. Hickory shows up constantly as the default, described in the thread as genuinely god tier. Applewood gets described as sweeter and softer. Then there's an entire secondary league. Most non-Americans have never heard of mesquite, cherrywood, pecan, each one changing the final taste in a specific, deliberate way closer to a wine or whiskey conversation than a simple breakfast side. And the texture debate is just as serious as the wood debate. People have genuinely specific, almost poetic language for the correct level of doneness. Floppy crisp, a little limber, leave just a bit of wiggle in it. Crispy enough to have structure, but never so far gone that it turns rigid and flaccid. It's an oddly precise vocabulary for something that on paper is just cooked pork fat. There's also a genuine, if slightly embarrassing, cross-cultural mix-up buried in this thread, because bacon doesn't mean the same thing everywhere, even within English. Multiple people pointed out that in a lot of European countries, what gets sold and labeled as bacon in a regular grocery store is closer to what Americans would just call ham. Flatter, leaner, closer in texture to deli meat than to a crisp American strip. One commenter put it bluntly, "It's genuinely sad that millions of people have grown up thinking that's what all the fuss is about, when the real thing is something else entirely." Even the specific comparison people reach for locally, Canadian bacon, turns out to be its own separate category entirely. It comes from the loin, like British-style bacon, leaner than a strip cut from the belly, closer to a thick-cut ham slice. And someone actually from Canada clarified that hardly anyone there eats it that way at all. Most Canadians default to the same fatty, belly-cut American-style strip. So if American bacon is really just a different cut of the same animal, why does it feel like such a bigger cultural obsession here than almost anywhere else? The honest answer is that Americans don't just eat bacon. They build entire dishes around the idea of add bacon as an instant flavor upgrade. Turkey sandwich, add bacon. Roasted vegetables, add bacon. A basic cheeseburger, add bacon. One specific Texas grocery chain sells jalapeno peppers stuffed with cream cheese and actual smoked brisket wrapped in a final layer of bacon. Purely so, it can go straight onto a grill. There's also a genuinely committed dessert-adjacent version, candied bacon, made by coating strips in brown sugar and a little cayenne pepper before baking, turning a savory breakfast meat into something that straddles the line between side dish and dessert. Someone described a burger, in Minnesota of all places, served with bacon and peanut butter together and swore, completely sincerely, that it worked. And there's a genuinely funny detail about how far this loyalty goes. Multiple people described otherwise strict vegetarians or vegans who make a specific deliberate exception purely for bacon, giving up cheese, giving up eggs, giving up everything else animal-derived without much struggle, but drawing a hard, non-negotiable line at bacon. One person's vegetarian mother-in-law goes rogue exactly once a year, purely for this. So bring it all the way back to that original, genuinely stunned first bite in Ireland. It wasn't really about America inventing something new. Bacon existed long before the country did. What America actually did was pick a different cut of the same animal. Lean into the fat instead of trimming it away. Layer a whole regional culture of smoking wood on top of it. And then build an entire food identity around treating that one ingredient as a universal upgrade to almost anything else on the plate. Which might be the most honest answer buried in the whole thread. It's not that American bacon is objectively, scientifically superior in some absolute sense. It's that an entire country collectively decided which part of the pig deserves the spotlight, and then never really stopped talking about it since. If a single cut of meat can turn into a full-blown national obsession, wait until you hear the real reason Americans pack up and move house almost every single year. Same restless energy, completely different subject. Tell me in the comments, loin-cut bacon or belly-cut bacon, which one did you grow up on?